Hello, dear viewers. Support me by subscribing to my channel and share my video if you like it. And also, make sure you comment your thoughts. Now let's start the video. Finally, she told him the rest of the story, although she kept some of the things which transpired in Bravoset, at the Twins and River Run, more vague. From his distraught look, she could see that even this vague version displeased him greatly. Suddenly, as silence built between them, she felt fearful. Does he think me a monster? Are you angry with me? Do you think me a terrible person for killing those people? She asked in a shaky voice. Jon gave her a hurt look and hugged her tightly. Nonsense. What makes you think that? You are my little sister, and I could never hate you. Anyway, I also did things I'm not proud of. I am only happy that you are back, he stated. After he let Arya out of his embrace, she looked up, her eyes fixed at him. I don't regret it, though. Old Walder Frey deserved to die, she told him honestly. Jon nodded in understanding. She felt lighter now, as if a heavy burden fell from her shoulder. After the Battle of Highgarden was won, the Dragon Queen drifted between life and death for weeks. If it wasn't for her resilience and the capable master residing in Highgarden, she would have probably died. Now, after weeks of slow travel, they were back in Dragonstone. All the while, Jon tried to wrap his head around what happened. It was in the midst of battle the green-colored dragon came to save Jon's life. It was a strange feeling he had in regard to the creature itself. It was some sort of companionship, which felt similar to Ghost. Is that my Targaryen blood speaking? Jon smiled wryly, trying to forget the feeling of fear he felt when the dragon propelled him through the air and remembered Tyrion's word of thanks for saving the queen. Jon wanted to laugh at how ridiculous it was. It wasn't me who saved her. I could hardly keep control of the dragon. It was all the dragon. It makes one wonder how smart these creatures actually are. Did the dragon know that she was in danger? What did Tyrion call the dragon again? Rodyagle? Well, now there are probably only 2 dragons left, Jon muttered, and wanted to punch something. He poured himself some more wine, and drowned it again. At least the Lannister army was destroyed. Jane snapped him out of his whirl of thoughts and gave him a good-natured smile. Shall I take a look at your wound? She offered. I know a bit about healing. He nodded, and from the look in her brown eyes, she seemed happy to do something. So he let her wash his wound and bandage it up with fresh linen. Where is Arya again? He asked after she was finished. Her sister is with the Hound. They are sparring. She said she needs to keep informed. Jane returned with an amused smile. Jon laughed. If Lady Stark could see her now, she would probably want my head. When Jane grew sad at the mention of Lady Stark, he wanted to slap himself. I am sorry. I should not have mentioned her. He apologized. She smiled instead, banishing away the sadness in her eyes. It is all right. It is just that I remember something she said about you. She told me a story about how you got sick, and she felt horrible how she treated you. I admit I didn't know her very well, but I got the feeling she felt what happened to her children was because she mistreated you. She explained, and Jon stared at her in shock and silence. What I want to say is that I felt she regretted in the end how she treated you, she added. Jon did not know what to say, so he decided to change the topic. You mentioned earlier that Lord Tyrion spoke with you, he asked. Yes, he said he wishes to speak with you, in the library. Glad that he could find a reason to forget the topic of Lady Stark. He left to find Tyrion, who spent these days of waiting, sitting, and reading. Among the dusty shelves in the library. Some nights he would sit there for hours until the candles were burned down. There you are, Jon, he said, and put his book away. How is your queen? Jon asked in return, and sat down. Tyrion sighed. The master said she will survive. However, he explained, she would probably feel those wounds for years to come, he answered. Jon nodded in understanding. I still feel the pain from the arrows Ygritte gave me. And what will we do afterwards? He inquired further. Tyrion's face grew dark. We will have to confront my sister and brother, he said with a bitter tinge in his voice. With Viserion missing or dead, the queen will demand fire and blood, I guess. And the wildfire? Jon asked. Tyrion sighed. I am not sure. All I know is that it will be bloody. My only hope is that Cersei will see reason. But I doubt it. Jon nodded. The way you described her sounded not very reasonable. And your brother, well, I think not very highly of him. Tyrion shrugged, and the lack of words by the dwarf made Jon nervous. He remembered how the queen tried to save her children during the battle, how she was hit by 2 arrows. They shot her from the sky like a lyre. It was quite humbling to see how those dragons, both human and scaled, could be taken down. Not that it mattered anymore. The Lannister Queen's army was gone and dead, most of them burned or killed in battle. The Dothraki took some losses too, and they also lost Lady Olenna, who took poison when Hired was sacked. But in the end, they won. Now we only need to take King's Landing, and then I can go home. There is something else I wanted to ask you, the dwarf asked reluctantly. Jon already had a feeling what he wanted to ask. In fact, he was surprised the dwarf waited so long. What is it? Did your father really never make any mention about your mother? He asked. Jon tried to smile, but failed. He said he would tell me about my mother once he returned, but he never did. Tyrion sipped from his wine, his two eyes glinting in pale candlelight. Yes, Joffrey, he liked to ruin things for others, the dwarf joked, and put the goblet down. Well, to come back to the topic at hand, I spoke with Lord Varys about the matter, and he suggested your mother might be a Shara Dane. Has your father ever made a mention of her? He might in passing, but why are you asking? Lady Acido, Tane. Didn't have old Valyrian blood. It is because the dragon allowed me to ride him. That is why you ask, he returned vaguely. Should I tell him, or should I rather tell the queen first? She might be angry otherwise. Well, Jon, you got yourself quite into some deep shit. Yes, indeed, I also have the feeling you know more than you admit to say, the dwarf replied with an amused smile. To be honest, I only brought up Ashura Dane to test you a little. Jon tried to keep a blank face. I see, he began carefully. However, I wish to talk about this with the queen first. I hope it does not anger you. The dwarf laughed. No, I respect your wishes. Jon felt a deep relief at that. Thank you. Well, then I should get some sleep, and you yourself could use a little as well, Tyrion said and patted his shoulder. Tomorrow we might know more. Jon reluctantly agreed, and went to bed after having dinner with Arya. Tormund and Ser Davos, although he found little sleep. Again and again, he dreamed of the crypt in Winterfell, the eyes of the dead kings following him and his dead mother calling for him. When he awoke, a sheen of light fell through the windows. He looked outside and found a pale violet sky dawning. However, there were no news about the queen, so to get his mind off his problems, he asked Tormund to spar with him on Aradier's suggestion. They trained hour upon hour until Jon's wounds started to hurt. Tormund looked happy when he could finally retire. When you are bored, you fight like a madman, Tormund told him before he departed. When they returned to the castle, Tyrion awaited him in company of Lady Jane. It was not the first time that found the lady in the dwarf's company. One day, Jane even mentioned how witty she found the little lord and how she liked that he was able to make her laugh. Not that Jon minded. My brother is long dead. Good news, the queen is awake, she said, as he and Arya entered. He felt a deep feeling of relief wash over him. His memories of dragging her body from the battlefield as Drogon burned men left and right came back to him. Rosier wished to speak with her as well, so Jon assured her he would introduce them soon enough. When he entered, she sat propped up against a good number of cushions. Her wounds were bandaged and her face was ashen pale. She looked quite weak, but her purple eyes shone with the ever-burning determination. He gave her a respectful bow. I am glad to see you are awake, he said. She tried to smile, but it never reached her face. There was a deep sorrow in her features. It was hard to describe. She looked like someone who lost some part of herself. Not unlike me when I returned. I regret your loss, he added simply. She looked away, rubbing her face with her good arm. Then she laughed. You probably think me a stupid little girl, crying like that, she remarked. No, never. Why would I think that? He asked, perplexed. I cried myself when Robb and my father died, he wanted to say, but kept silent. She laughed despite her sadness. Those dragons are the only children I will ever have, she explained, and there was such an anguish in her words it pained Jon's heart, despite not quite understanding what she meant. He wanted to ask, but stopped himself. That is none of my business. You will get your revenge. The Lannister Queen's army is destroyed, and you still have 2 dragons, your grace, he returned carefully. She nodded, her whole demeanor changing. Yes, I still have 2 dragons, and one of those was quite taken with you, according to Lord Tyrion. Jon nearly froze. He breathed deeply and turned back to her, his heart beating fast. It is time, is it not, to finally tell the truth? It seems so, he replied neutrally. She only gave him a silent look as if urging him to finally speak the truth. It has to do with my mother, he added. Lord Tyrion told me Lord Stark didn't tell you who your mother is. It makes sense. Maybe she had Valyrian blood, she offered as a possible explanation. Jon's mouth felt dry, but he was determined enough to decide right there that he wouldn't lie to her. If I want her as my ally, she needs to know the truth. No, she didn't, he replied in a shaky voice. However, my father did. She gave him a confused look. I don't remember any Starks ever marrying into the Targaryen family or any family with Valyrian blood, she continued. But Jon cut her off. No, but my mother did. She ran off with the last dragon, he offered in return, his heartbeat drumming in his ears. When he looked back at Daenerys, she stared at him frozen in utter shock. I am sorry for not telling you sooner, but I didn't know how you would react. I feared you might think I want your crown, which I do not. All I wish for is for you to help me defeat the White Walkers, he explained. She did not answer a single word, and only poured herself some of the wine which was standing on a table next to her bed, before pouring it down in one gulp. Then she closed her eyes and took a long breath. Then she started to laugh. It was a giggle first and then turned into a full-blown laughter. Jon only sat in silence. He did not dare to speak. When she stopped, she poured herself another goblet of wine and drowned it again. Then she turned back to him, her gaze harder. I am sorry, but this sounds like utter madness. And then it makes sense if you think about it. All my life I hated the Starks, but now you tell me that your Fathnor, your uncle, protected you all your life. It feels as if the gods are mocking me. Jon was stunned into silence by her words. He expected a more angered reaction. This makes you my nephew, then. Tell me, how long did you know about this? She asked. Not very long, which made it hard for me to accept, he returned carefully. Then she gave another shaky laugh. And you are not wrong. If you told me your story when first meeting me, I would have reacted differently. However, I know you now, and I believe you when you say you have no wish for the crown. Jon did not know, could feel relieved yet. So, you are not angry? She frowned. Angry? I can't really place how I feel. This is all so sudden. The only thing I know is that I am not the only Targaryen anymore. Then she was silent for a moment, her gaze darting to the window. I will need some time to think about this, she finally answered, which he could accept. There is more, he added, suddenly reminding himself about Arzier's wish. My sister Arya came here. I will tell you later how. But she wishes to speak with you about something important. She wouldn't tell me what, but she asked to speak with you. Daenerys sighed. Tell her I will speak with her soon. I promise. I feel tired and should rest, or the maester might scold me. Jon left, not quite able to comprehend his whirl of thoughts and feelings. The cells were dark and dusty. Only a small stream of sunlight fell into the small cell where Lord Daenerys was held. Sansa was dressed in gray, the colors of her house and her red hair. Braided back with her was Lord Harding. To speak to Lord Daenerys. For days the Lord had spent in the cells, refusing to speak a single word, and Lord Harding was getting impatient. Lord Baxley's looked up when they entered, his hair disheveled and his face dirty. Are you here to kill me? He asked, his gray-green eyes blinking in the darkness. Sansa kept her mask in place, showing him her blank face. None of us here is a butcher, my lord. Lord Harding is here to make an offer to you, she told him coldly. He stood up and came closer to the bars. He gave her a bitter smile. What offer? Confess your crimes and I will give you mercy. You may choose a quick death or take the black. The choice is yours, the Lord Harding said. He only laughed in return. And what if I don't confess? There will be a trial, of course, Sansa replied calmly. Lord Baxley's, even louder. It was a laugh so hollow it made her heart freeze. A trial I will certainly lose. Nothing about this trial would be fair. Half the lords in the Vale want me gone, and the other half is bought. At his answer, Sansa felt deep-seated anger rise inside her. Fair? Where was the fair trial for my father? She stepped forward, hissing at him. Then he stopped to laugh and only looked at her in silence for a moment. Now you care about your family? I remember when you only dreamed about getting a crown and birthing golden-haired children for Cersei Lannister's bastard boy. Do you remember? He asked. The question stung harder than Sansa wanted to admit, but the anger inside her washed it away. It was you who betrayed my father. I know it. Tell me, was it you, as well, who asked Joffrey to take my father's head? She asked in a shaky voice. All Joffrey needed was a few words and your father's fate was sealed, was all he said. Then he grinned madly. Don't you see that all I did was for your mother? First, she was nearly married off to your Uncle Brandon. Oh, I am sure your father told you what a wonderful person he was. Let me tell you the truth. He would have made your mother unhappy. He would have fathered more bastards than true-born children. Yes, such a man was that, not to say stupid as a horse. And then she had to marry your father. I wanted to free Cat, and that is all. I loved her all my life. She was the only thing I ever wanted, he explained. Sansa backed away and bumped against Lord Harding, who had listened to everything in silence. He patted her shoulder in a comforting gesture. Sansa took a long breath. No, Lord Baxley, you destroyed my mother. She truly loved my father. My aunt loved you with all her heart. And you used her as well. So tell me now, what is your answer? He leaned his head against the bars. I will not confess. I will not take the black and spend my life in this frozen wasteland. I choose trial by combat. Let your ugly wench fight against one of my people, and let's see how well she will hold against a real knight. Sansa allowed herself to openly glare at him. Lady Brienne is a true knight. Well then, sleep well. And so she left with Lord Harding, wondering who would come forward to fight for Lord Baelus. A few days later, the day came dawning cold, and with an icy wind greeting them in the morning. Lady Brienne looked startling in her polished armor, and her sword even more. Oathkeeper, it was named. Made out of father's sword, ice. I am sorry, my lady, for letting you fight my battle, Sansa apologized to Lady Brienne. Lady Brienne smiled a little. I am your sworn sword, and it is my duty. Sansa wanted to return something, but then Lord Baxley was brought before Lord Harding. The blonde Lord of the Vale glanced around among the assembled knights. Is there anyone willing to fight for Lord Baines to defend his honor? He asked in a booming voice. After some silence, a knight stepped forward. He wore silver-polished armor and was of a warrior-hardened stature. Yes, I intend to defend Lord Baines and fight against this woman, the man said with a sneer, looking at Lady Brienne as if she was some common tavern wench not worth his tonnage. At his words, a snickering and laughter could be heard from some, and Sansa forced herself to keep calm. Now they laugh. But they never saw her fight. The battle started with the Lady Brienne and said knight encircling one another. The first exchange of swords was tentative as if to measure the enemy. However, soon the Vale Knight proved more bold, raining a solid barrage of blows against Lady Brienne's shield. The metallic clatter of blades ringed through the courtyard, but Lady Brienne's arm was strong and so was her shield. Then, making use of the moment, Lady Brienne moved quickly, despite her heavy armor, and thrusted her sword forward. The tip of the blade piercing the other knight's tight, crimson blood trailed down his feet, and he gave a painful grunt while he deflected a blow which would have certainly pierced his side. A fast exchange of brute force followed the gasps of the lady and the knight ringing in the air. However, the knight was not match against her lady knight. Soon his strength was floundering, and he was staggering back from the sheer force of her blows. Sansa could only stare and wonder where she took the strength. Then in one fast movement the knight lunged forward, his strike again deflected by Lady Brienne. In this moment of vulnerability she shoved her shield hard and made the knight fall back on the ground, his sword slipping out of his grasp. Do you yield? Lady Brienne asked, her sword tip at his throat, while the courtyard was filled with utter silence. Sansa looked at Lord Baelus' ashen face. That is for underestimating the Lady Brienne who was sent by my mother to be my sworn shield. Maybe it was justice that it was her who would bring you down, for father and mother and all the people you betrayed. I yield, the knight finally said, in a hoarse voice. Lord Harding addressed Lord Baxley one last time. Confess, my lord, and take the black. This is my last offer to you. Lord Bates refused to speak and only glared at Sansa. He wants me to feel guilty. Lord Harding gave a grim nod. Well then, Lord Baelish, it is your decision, he said, and turned to the Lady Knight. With this you are found guilty for the murder of Lord Arryn and Lady Arryn. Yet Lady Brienne only looked at Sansa and nodded. In the end it was quick and fast while Sansa watched and thought of her father. Daenerys hid her wounds under a long black silk dress. She walked in pain, only doused by the milk of the poppy. But she would not budge. She was too proud for it. She entered room of the painted table where all her people were assembled. There was Lady Arianne with her husband, King Jon with his newly arrived sister Arya, and of course her own loyal people, especially Lord Tyrion and Missandei. And at last Lord Royce, who arrived several days ago to speak with her regarding a possible allegiance with the Vale. She stood and let her gaze wander around the group of people. I thank you all for coming together. As every one of you might have guessed, I want to finally bring the battle to Queen Cersei. I am tired of waiting, and I can see many of you are as well. Lord Taxleo clapped hesitatingly. He lost a good number of his men during the Battle of Hiarden, and the death of his grandmother, Lady Olenna, only added to his tired and haggard look. He looked like a man tired of war. So how will we do it? He inquired. Daenerys sat down in her chair. Simple. We will attack the city, but a siege will be unavoidable. Is there really no way to keep her from using her wildfire? Lady Asha Greyjoy asked. Lord Tyrion gave her a defeated look in return. Not that I am aware of, he replied. So it is unavoidable, Princess Arianne muttered and covered her swollen belly. Then she moved in her seat to look at Daenerys, her dark eyes glinting with determination. Whatever happens, my spears are yours, your grace. Daenerys gave her a thankful smile and glanced back at Jon and his sister Arya. Jon seemed a bit absent while Arya carried a serious look with her mighty direwolf settled next to her. Ghost, on the other hand, lay propped before Jon's feet, his ruby eyes observing everything with wide eyes. Daenerys glazed a little longer at Jon's features, trying to find the Valyrian blood. Sure, his dark hair and this solemn face was all his Stark mother, which was all the more visible as he sat there next to his sister, cousin. However, she found his eyes were darker and his nose seemed more graceful. It is really hard to think of him as anything else than a Stark. Mayhaps it was his luck that he had no silver hair and purple eyes. The usurper would have certainly killed him like my other niece and nephew. Embarrassed, she brushed those thoughts away and turned her attention back to the assembled crowd, especially at the serious-looking lady, Arya Stark. Still, he lied to me. I will have to speak with him after the Lannister queen is defeated. Said lady was flanked by her sort of protector, the Hound, or also commonly known as Sandor Clegane. He was a more than hideous man who hardly spoke with anyone other than the girl. At first, she wanted him imprisoned for she mistook him for his brother. But the girl assured her with a defiant look that he hated his brother more than anyone in his world. He burned his face. I am of course aware of the wildfire problem, but Lady Arya here made a suggestion to me how we might be able to avoid the problem. She said and offered a smile to the girl. Jon glanced at his sister in surprise, and so did most of the other people in the room. Not that Daenerys was surprised by their reaction. She herself was surprised how bold this girl came to her and proposed her plan. She is certainly someone who seems grown up beyond her years, or just someone who experienced more terrible things than the average person. The girl gave a nod while her face showed an almost unreadable expression. She only brushed her braided brown hair out of her face and stood there resting her hand proudly at the small sword at her hip. Her gaze wandered confidently over the assembled crowd of people. When I was still living in the Red Keep with my father being Hand of the King, I often explored the keep on my own. What I found while doing so could be a valuable advantage to us, she explained. What valuable advantage are you speaking of? Tyrion asked with curiosity. The girl gave a smirk. Have you ever heard about the dragon skulls hidden under the Red Keep? Tyrion nodded, and so did Daenerys. Yes, my brother told me about them. The skulls of the old dragons are hidden there, right? Exactly, but there is more to found there. There are hidden passages leading inside and outside to Flaybottom. I don't know who built them, but I might be able to find the way back inside. With this, we might be able to infiltrate the city and take Cersei down before she can do anything stupid. The girl explained carefully. Tyrion looked relieved and smiled, while Jon looked at his sister in tense silence. Daenerys, however, turned to Lord Varys, who nodded in acknowledgement, inclining his head towards Arya. These passages do exist, and I have quite an in-depth knowledge about them. I might help you fabricate a map so you might find your way back more easily, he offered, at which Arya smirked, carrying an almost knowing expression. It is not a bad idea. We could have a small group infiltrating the city while we pretend to attack, Tyrion remarked. Exactly, and I will be the one infiltrating the city for you, Arya declared boldly. She seemed like a little girl being handed a dozen of presents at once. Jon, on the other hand, looked more displeased than she had ever seen him. Certainly not. It is far too dangerous. What if the madwoman burns down the whole city? You just came back to us. Sansa would have my head if I just allow you to put yourself into danger again, he replied tensely. Atcher gave him a stubborn look in return. I know Fleabottom, and I am the only one who can find the way, brother. Apart from that, I will take the Hound with me. You yourself know what I can do, she replied. However, Jon looked equally stubborn. Daenerys understood his feelings, but then there was also the fact that she felt what the girl suggested was the right thing. Maybe it is only me clinging to the fleeting hope that Cersei Lannister won't burn the whole city. Jon stood abruptly. Then I will go with you, he demanded. Rhaenyra frowned, crossing her arms in front of her. You are the king in the north. If it fails, I won't have you dead like Robb. Jon blinked and looked back at her in shock. I am not Robb. I promise I won't die. But I can't let you go alone, he declared. Arya looked back at him, her mask slipping and showing the emotions lurking behind her unreadable expression. She looks hurt. After all I told you, do you not trust my abilities? Is it because I am a girl? she asked. Jon looked at the girl like someone slapped him. No, never, he continued, but the girl cut him off. But you won't allow me to make my own decisions, she continued to ask, not prepared to give in. After a moment of heavy silence, Jon fell back in his chair and gave a defeated sigh. I do trust your abilities. All right, you can go. But promise me you keep away from enemies you can't fight, he said, in an almost whisper. But from the expression in his face, Daenerys could see that he was forcing himself to say those words. Arya smiled brighter than the sun. Thank you, Jon. Don't worry, I know how to keep the girl away from killing herself, she heard the Hound add. So after the talking was finally done, Daenerys clapped her hands together. Well then, let us finally end the reign of the Lannister Queen. Since she came to Westeros, she had felt aimless, but now she could see the future that was before her. She would take the crown stolen from her family so long ago, and she would bring peace to the Seven Kingdoms. She had no living child, but a strange motherly feeling filled her when she thought of her people. She knew it then. She would protect them against any enemy, be it the Lannister Queen or those White Walkers. Fire and blood would only be reserved for her enemies, but peace was something she wanted to bring back to this fractured land. It was the only thing she could do to mend some of the crimes her father committed. King's Landing was easier to enter than they thought. Arya dressed herself in rags, and the Hound hid his burned face behind a cloak. For them, he was her father, and Arya one of the many beggars coming to the city and searching for a better life. Now that winter was coming, people were hoping to find protection from the cold behind the high walls of the city. However, as everyone in the city, they soon found out that everyone lived in constant fear of the Queen's loyal gold cloaks, who didn't allow people leave the city once arrived. They mixed themselves among the refugees in Flea Bottom, hoping to gather some valuable information. After all, the attack was planned in a week's turn, and if something important came up, they could still call off the attack, should it be too dangerous. Their first visit was the prominent tavern called the Old Man's Hovel. It was like most things in Flea Bottom, a rat-infested shithole with ale like pisswasser. But the Hound told her that this is the place to go to meet people. A bard with a passable voice sang his songs while they settled on some old wooden table. They ordered some ale and ate some half-burned broth with bread. Arya did not care for. She was used to far worse. Arya, intentionally dressed rather scantily in a dress revealing her still-growing bosom and her athletic limbs. Her hair was open for a change, and it fell in wild locks to her shoulders. If Jon saw me like this, he would lock me up and never let me out. The Hound told her some bawdy jokes, and soon enough, a group of other people joined their group. Some of them were men who seemed to enjoy her smiles and laughs, while the women asked the Hound many a question about their travels. So you people are from the Riverlands, one of the men asked. He was maybe 16 name days and not ugly save for his unruly yellow teeth. His name was Gale, and he was a butcher. Yes, we fled all the way here from the cold winter, she told him. He drank from the ale and nodded. Is it true that the Frey Lords all died from poison? He asked with curiosity. Well, those fuckers broke the gods' guest right. Serves them right, I say. An older man added. Arya smiled brightly. Yes, that is what we heard. Also, it seems Lord Tully is again in control of Riverrun. No wonder the Mad Queen is calling her remaining soldiers back here, he whispered now. Yes. And soon the Dragon Queen will bring her dragons here and burn us all to death, the old man muttered. Or the Mad Queen will burn us all. I have heard she is asking for more and more wildfire. Better would it be, or us all to get away, as soon as possible. Not that the gold cloaks would allow it. Wildfire? Arya asked innocently. Have you heard about the Battle of Blackwater and how the wildfire killed Stannis Baratheon's army? Gale asked. We did, the Hound remarked, pouring himself some wine now. Tell us what the Queen intends with all the wildfire. Does she think she can fight dragonfire with wildfire? He said, with amused laughter. The fucking Queen wants to burn us all to keep the Dragon Queen from the city, the old man muttered angrily. Took my son-in-law and killed him. They say the monster protecting the Queen cut him into pieces. My neighbor's sister was raped by a band of gold cloaks, he added, and put his tankard back on the table. Isn't there anything that can be done? Arya asked, again innocently. Gale's blue eyes widened at this in fear. Careful, the city is full of spies for the Mad Queen. Her hand has all the street children as his little birds. Took a good number of people in the last weeks, and no one ever saw them again. So you fuckers all kneel in fear of the Mad Queen? Don't you see that her rule will not last for long? The Dragon Queen will take her crown soon. Haven't you heard about her defeat at the Battle of Highgarden? The Hound asked, not caring for any consequences. Gale looked insulted by his words. We do all we can during the circumstances. Haven't you heard about the bull and his brave fellows? Now that sparked Arya's curiosity. The bull, is he some sort of knight? Gale smiled a little. He tries to protect the people from the gold cloaks. Saved my cousin from rape a moon ago. Now that is something we could use. They obviously don't like the queen. Maybe we could make some allies. The Hound understood immediately. Could we meet this bull? I once served as a soldier. I could be of help, and I am itching to kill some of those gold cloak fuckers, he remarked, showing his teeth while smiling. Gale nearly spluttered out all his ale. He took a moment to regain his posture before leaning closer. Why would I trust you? He asked suspiciously. How do I know that you are not spies of the queen? The Hound gave a bark of laughter. Let us leave this place and I will tell you, boy. Gale looked at them in silence. Then he stood and they made their way outside. The night was upon them already, and the smell of shit pervaded every street they walked. So what proof can you offer? Gale asked. The Hound pulled his cloak down, revealing his face. Do you know of any knight with such a burned face? He asked the boy. The boy stared at him with wide eyes and his face so pale as if all blood was drained out of him. The Hound, the monster's brother, he said in a hushed whisper. The Hound frowned at this. My brother is still alive, he asked. The boy nodded. Yes, he is the very monster that serves the queen. The Hound gave a murderous smile. Well, this is even better than I thought. Maybe my brother and I will finally be able to settle our differences. Now, boy, tell me what the queen would do with a deserter if she knew I was alive. The Hound asked. The boy did not dare to speak. She would kill me, of course, the Hound told him and patted him on the shoulder. Arya gave him an angry glare. Stop scaring him. Then she turned to look at Gale. Is that proof enough? We have important information that might help this bull in his endeavor, she explained and took his hand. All right, follow me, he explained in a whisper. They followed him through dark streets into an unknown part of Flea Bottom. In a small house, the boy led them inside. He was greeted by a group of young boys and girls in rags and armed with daggers and pitchforks. Gale, who are you bringing with you? One of them asked. He was a tall, thin boy with greasy black hair. His right eye was an empty socket, and it looked like someone picked it out. I bring friends who wish to speak with the bull, he told the boy, who seemed some sort of a leader among the group. The boy eyed them with an indifferent gaze. You are lucky, friends. He is here, he explained, and led them through a long, dark corridor into the cellar of the building. The building itself was a ruin and probably an abandoned house. Half of the walls were burned, and there were cracks everywhere. In a small room without windows, they found dozens of those people similar to those they encountered before. Most of them were half-starved youths with self-made weapons. If those are the brave fellows, I am surprised they are not dead, the Hound remarked with sarcasm. Arya nodded grimly. Well, I also expected something different. Well, we have to work with what we have got. Bull, the dark-haired young man addressed a man sitting at the fire. He was tall and broad-built, almost like a bear. He was dressed in commoner's clothing, and on his head he wore a fine helmet in the form of a bull. On his side hung a large warhammer. She could not read his emotions as his face was hidden. However, the moment she came forward, he stood suddenly very still. Rezia, is that you? He suddenly asked, and Arya almost felt her heart stop. Gods, this voice is so familiar. In a matter of seconds, he pulled the helmet from his face, and Arya was speechless for a moment. Back at her looked a familiar face framed by sweaty dark hair and blue eyes like a spring sky. It can't be. The Red Woman took you, she exclaimed, and hugged him without another thought. He only smiled and hugged her back, nearly lifting her off the ground. I escaped, and now I am here helping the people, he explained with a bout of laughter. Arya laughed too. She felt lighter than in years. Gods, I thought you were dead for sure, he said, and put her down on the ground. He looked at her face with wide blue eyes and brushed her wild locks out of her face. It was strangely comfortable, and it made her feel all warm. You know these people? The one-eyed boy asked, with a surprised look. Gendry grinned brightly from one ear to the other. May I introduce Arya, an old friend of mine? He said, and it was now that he recognized the Hound, who watched everything with a blank look. Also, the Hound seemed to recognize the boy. I remember you, boy, the Hound remarked. So you are now playing a knight? Gendry's face grew more serious. I am no knight. I am a bastard born and raised in Flea Bottom. The Hound obviously wanted to return something, but Arya cut him off. Gendry, we may have important information for you. Maybe we can all calm down and I will tell you everything. she asked, grabbing him by the shoulder and giving him a hopeful look. He turned back to look at her. The tension in his body subsided. Yes, let's talk. Rosier smiled in relief. They sat for a long time as Arya explained her plan to enter the Red Keep and ending Cersei's mad reign. In the end, Gendry sipped at his soup and looked rather serious. "And you are sure this Dragon Queen is better?" he asked skeptically. "Wasn't her father mad and killed one of yours?" "I met her and she seems fine with me. My brother formed an allegiance with her too. He is a king now," she explained with a smile. All the other youths eyed her with awe. "So you are a princess then?" one of the younger girls asked. Rosier frowned. "Don't call me that. Do I look like a princess to you?" Gendry laughed. "It seems you haven't changed at." Arya returned his laughter. "I seem so," she said. "However, there is something far more important than taking down Cersei. We need to kill her. Hand. He is the one putting wildfire all over the city from what we know." "Will you help us?" Arya finally asked after a moment of silence. Gendry nodded, his dark hair fluttering around his face. He grabbed his war hammer and stood. "Of course you have my hammer for whatever it is worth." The ships were seen in morning sporting the banner of House Targaryen. Jaime pulled his cloak tighter to ward of the cold wind. The sky was dreary and the sun hardly showed itself more than a few hours each day. Now, snowflakes were falling upon the city and it seemed winter had finally come. Winter is coming. Old Lord Stark was seen as a fool for always repeating those words. But now Jaime felt a sense of remorse when he thought of the lord who died because of his selfish bastard son. Maybe it is punishment for his deeds. For letting my sister sacrifice good men. He carefully touched his face and flinched because of the pain. It made him think of Bronn, who saved his life. Anger at himself, and his sister arose anew. He wondered what the Dragon Queen will do with him if she makes it here. Will she burn me? Well, it is over now. He smiled weakly. Even Euron Greyjoy was smart enough to abandon my sister. Smarter than you, fool. He found the men of the King's Guard in their assigned room. They all tried to appear stoic and indifferent, but Jaime could see the fear in their faces. Well, no one likes being burned to death. "What do you want here, Kingslayer?" one of them asked. Cersei exchanged them regularly. Now, and he knew no one of the former members anymore. "I am here to save the city," he declared, his hand resting on the hilt of his blade. "The Queen spread the wildfire in the city. She intends to kill the Dragon Queen and sacrifice the small folk. If we don't stop her, all of us will burn with her. We are the King's Guard, and we do not flee," the youngest among them replied. Jaime would have laughed at him, but he saw himself in the younger man. "The foolish child I once was." "Then go and die," Jaime replied. "Let your brothers choose for themselves." He looked at each of them. "I know what you think of me. You see me as a traitor for killing Avarys. Well, I had my reasons for it. The Mad King wanted to burn the whole city, women and children alike. My sister intends the same, and I wish to stop her. I want your help, but I won't force you." The oldest of the men showed outright contempt for his words. "You forget that you are no longer Lord Commander. You are dismissed. We serve our queen," he declared. "Anyone deserting from his post will be killed by my hand," he added, looking back at his men. Jaime did not hesitate, and drew his sword. The older man was fast as well, but had no chance against someone younger who had been honed by battle in the last moons. He parried his blows, and his sharp blade cut him in the neck, making the older man collapse like a puppet without strings. The remaining men looked at him quietly, their swords ready to attack, but Jaime smiled back at them. "Now who wants to be the next? None of you can defeat me, and you know it. Listen now, I will give you one last chance to help me. Make your choice fast," he declared. The youngest one rushed at him, and he parried the blow with his golden hand. The young man paled visibly as Jaime held his sharp blade to his neck. "Why won't you see reason?" he asked, a bit frustrated by their blind loyalty. "I won't be named a Queenslayer," the younger man replied in a desperate tone. Jaime understood then, far better than the young men could ever know. Then it hit him like thunder. I am no longer one of the King's Guard. House Lannister claimed the throne. He could have laughed at himself. In all my sorrow, I forgot one important thing. You are my only heir, my oldest son and heir. Those were the words his father once spoke to him. What seemed years ago. He had wanted him to give up his place in the King's Guard. Jaime agreed in exchange for Tyrion's life. He was no longer a member of the King's Guard. He was free now. I am the oldest son. Am I not? Jaime laughed loudly. All his life he wanted to be a knight, and nothing more. Maybe I have to become a king even if it is only for a short time. He let the younger man go. Tell me who rules in your lordship. Tell me, is it your older sister who inherits before you? The younger man's eyes widened in understanding. No, my older brother reigns before my sister, he answered in a shaky voice. Jaime smiled. Yes, indeed. You see now, my sister may have claimed the throne for House Lannister, but I am a Lannister too. As you said, I am free of the King's Guard now. I am the oldest son. I claim the throne. Serve me as short as it may be. Let us save the city and its people. Once it is done, I will free you all. The younger man still looked at him with wide eyes. A moment of silence passed, and the younger man drew his blade and laid it in front of Jaime. I am at your service, your grace, he said. His gaze wandered back to his brothers. They did the same, probably more hoping to save their lives than caring about the throne. Jaime wanted to laugh and laugh. Do you see me, father? I am a king now. Hours upon hours passed. Then the ships could be seen from afar. There were the banners of House Targaryen, Tyrell and Martell. Jaime touched his sword as if it would ward of the fear inside him. He felt slightly feverish and wished for sleep, yet he knew what he had to do. So he made his way back inside to the throne room with 2 of the remaining King's Guard members. The others he sent to take Maester Clyburn and his servants captive or kill them if necessary. Cersei sat like always perched on her beloved throne. She was dressed in red silk now, her golden hair nearly reaching the nape of her neck again. Her green eyes blazed in the 100 torched illuminating the wide hall. At her side was her monster. The knight Cersei Gregor, what do you want? She asked him coldly, as he stopped in front of the stairs leading up to the ugly chair. Jaime tried to cast away all the love he once held for her, and braced himself for what was to come. Your reign is over, sister. I will not let you burn the city. As the oldest son of House Lannister, I claim the crown for myself, he declared tiredly and lacking strength. He felt so tired of this all. Cersei's eyes blazed like wildfire. She stood her fingers desperately grasping the throne. Blood was now running down from her arms as the molten blades cut into her skin. You would not dare, she yelled back at him. He grasped the hilt of his sword tightly, trying to remain calm and composed. I dare, he returned. She grimaced and her face turned cold as stone. Her gaze wandered to Sir Gregor Clegane. Kill Sir Jaime, she ordered her monster. Strong as the monster was, Jaime knew it wouldn't be easy. He parried the first blow, then the next and another. He was surprised how fast this monster was, despite its massive size. Jaime then parried another with his golden arm. The strength of the blow made his golden arm shake and ache terrible. He bit his lips, trying to banish away the pain. I will not fail. Another blow nearly gets him, but he ducks away fastly and bruises the monster at its type. Any other human would have felt the pain. However, the monster does not stop. Jaime feigns an attack, but the creature parried the blow again. Jaime felt sweat build on his brow and his feet trembling. No, I can't fail. So he rushes back at the monster. He does not know how much time went by. Soon his arm felt numb, but it seemed to him this monster would never tire. At one point his strength left him unable to dodge the hard blow to his shoulder, which fills his whole upper arm with a sharp stinging pain. He barely dodges another strike and stumbles back on the ground. Then the monster slashes his sword out his clammy hand. This is it. It is all over now. I failed. He looked up, seeing the monster lift his sword for the last strike. Jaime closed his eyes, but the deadly strike never came. When he opened his eyes again, he saw a huge man standing above him, and it took him a moment to realize who the man was. It was the Hound, his face as ugly as ever. No, there was no doubt about it. Jaime would have recognized his scarred face among thousands. Is this a dream? Am I going mad? Yet it was neither madness nor a dream, this he realized soon. I see you are still alive, brother. The Hound barked loudly. I will be a pleasure to kill you. And it seemed like a pleasure to the ugly knight indeed, for his strikes were hard and without any hint of fear as he rushed at the monster. All the while Jaime tried to pull himself up, searching for his sword, but found himself stopped by a girl in company of a tall boy, followed by a group of youths with ill-made weapons splattered in blood. His gaze darted to his King's Guard men, who stood like fools at the sideline. Not that he faulted them for not wanting to fight against the monster. Jaime grabbed the girl at the shoulder. He felt so tired and weary. The Queen is wildfire in the whole city. Master Qyburn needs to be stopped, he muttered. The girl pulled her cloak from her shoulders, and Jaime nearly fainted from the shock. It was as if Lyanna Stark came back from the death and decided to haunt him. I'm going mad. The girl smiled and pulled something out of her bag. It was round and wrapped in a white cloth, with blood seeping all through and dripping on the ground. "The maester is dead," she told him. Jaime felt a deep sense of relief wash over him. He grasped his arm. It was only now that he was really aware of the deep cut in his shoulder. His whole cloak was red and full of blood. Trying to forget the pain, he turned his attention back to the two knights slashing at one another. The song of swords rang bright and clear that moment. The hound's dark eyes glinted with rage as he never saw before. The monster rushed at the hound, but the younger brother parried each strike, returning every single one with equally fast strokes, driving the monster back and back again. All the while, the hound taunted his brother with every curse known to men. Truly no average knight would have withstood the hound's murderous assault other than the monster. More than once the monster warded of the slashes, even though Sir Gregor Clegane seemed far slower than his younger brother. However, this was balanced out by the sheer power of his blows, which would have ripped apart any normal man. It could have gone on like this, each man slashing at one another until one would finally collapse. Jaime was sure to know who that would be. The monster before him was no longer a creature of mortal flesh, but something twisted and murderous created by Maester Qyburn. It should have been the end for the hound. He slipped, and although he recovered, he was now open for attack. Fastly, the monster lunged forward, drawing blood from the hound's side. Then, in a mad rush of blood, the monster lunged forward, barely warded of by the hound, who seemed to slip again. However, to Jaime's utter surprise, the hound did not slip at all, but merely pretended. It was this moment when the monster's luck changed. The younger brother made use of the situation, as the monster was now open for attack as well. The hound acted fastly and brought his sword down on the monster's neck, nearly ripping away its head. Yet, the monster still moved. Jaime froze in shock, not believing his eyes. Gods, will it ever end? The hound seemed unbothered in his rage and swung his sword again this time, hitting the neck so hard the monster's head was flung through the hall. Then the monster stopped and collapsed. It was finally over. Jaime kneeled on the ground in his puddle of blood. He stared with wide eyes at the hound, who fell to his knees, leaning on his bloody sword. His breath was fast and he clutched his side. Yet, he smiled and smiled. Jaime never saw the hound smile like that. It made his blood freeze and made a shiver run down his spine. "You should rest, sir," the tall boy who accompanied the girl said, pulling down his cloak and pressing it against Jaime's wound. Now, as the boy's face was closer to Jaime, he felt like looking at a ghost again. It was young Robert Baratheon's face, mixed with the features of Rhaenys Baratheon. The girl with the dark hair and stark eyes joined the boy and pulled out a small blade. The girl's eyes darted to his sister, who stood at her throne, staring in shock at the unmoving corpse of her loyal servant. The girl's face changed to a wicked smile. It was a smile demanding blood. "Arya, what are you doing?" the boy asked quietly, but the girl only looked at his sister. Then, for a brief moment, she turned back and looked at Jaime. "Take care of him, Gendry. Lord Tyrion will want to speak with him for sure," she told the boy, and stepped towards the throne. Jaime knew it now. Arya Stark was back to take her revenge. He lacked the strength to continue fighting or stop the girl. And why would he? The battle is lost. The reign of the Lannisters is over. So he forced himself to watch and let emptiness take him. Jon could not believe they took the city without hardly putting up a fight. "Your sister is a true magician," Tyrion remarked, with an admiring smile. Jon did not know how he should react to this comment. If Lord Stark was alive, he would have my head for letting her do this. Instead, he smiled and admired the wide blue sea and the city rising in front of them. When they finally left the ships, they rode along tight, long, winding roads, while the small folk stood at the side trying to get a look at the Dragon Queen. Daenerys rode, of course, at the front on a horse, as pale as her silver hair and her dress. Behind her were a good number of knights to protect her. Jon was only shocked how miserable the small folk looked. Most of them were half-starved, and their clothing mere rags. They would have never survived a siege. Daenerys seemed happy enough. She smiled and winked, and when a group of dirty little children brought her a garland of flowers, she put them around her neck and thanked them kindly, kissing each their cheeks. Even Jon had to smile at the endearing picture. Sometimes the queen was almost cold, but then there were moments when she showed an honest smile and looked very much like the young woman she was. After a slow ride, they arrived at the Red Keep. It was a massive castle made out of pale red stone with strong drum towers crowned with iron ramparts. Almost invincible curtain walls surrounded this keep, protecting it against its enemies. Any army would have a hard time taking such a castle, Jon thought. Then they made their way to the great hall led by Varys. Like Tormund and Ser Davos, the queen observed everything with a wondrous look. Even Jon had to admit he was impressed. Heavy walls were carried by even higher pillars with large painted windows in crimson and gold. Only Tormund seemed even more impressed. It looked like his eyeballs were hanging out. Not that Jon was surprised. When Yaxley saw a mill once, she thought it was a palace after all. Then at last there was the Iron Throne. It truly was a monstrosity of spikes and twisted metal molten down into what looked like a very uncomfortable chair. It looked almost out of place in this beautiful built hall of gold and crimson. No queen or king would never sit easy in such a chair. Jon mused for a moment before his attention was suddenly diverted. "Jon!" Arya exclaimed and engulfed him in a tight hug. He felt a hint of relief wash over him, knowing that she was truly safe now. However, Jon barely recognized her when taking a closer look at her, for she wore a dress and her usually braided hair curled freely to her neck. She looked almost like a lady if it wasn't for that impish grin of hers and the little sword hanging at her side. He smiled down at her, and she let go of his neck, turning to the group of people behind her. Most of them were ill-fed youths who eyed the queen and her entourage with great interest. Then there was also a tall boy beside her. Jon thought he had a familiar face, but he could find no name in the spur of the moment. "May I present to you the bull and his brave fellows?" Arya introduced them with a flashy smile. "They helped me take down the servants of Maester Qyburn, while the hound killed the mountain. He is a little hurt, and the girls are taking care of him. But he said he would see us later." Daenerys granted them a smile in return, her gaze wandering over the youths, who eyed her with awe. "I thank you all for your bravery. Of course, every one of you will be rewarded, and are invited to join in the coming feast in honor of this victory," she explained, and earned herself some smiles and cheers. Then the queen turned to the boy, who urged to step forward. "And who is this valiant young man?" she asked with a teasing smile at Arya. He was dressed in commoner's clothing, but in his hand he carried a mighty warhammer. "It is you, boy?" Someone suddenly interrupted the scene. It was Ser Davos, who stared in wide eyes at the boy, who gave him a perplexed look in return. "Good sir," he started to mumble, and looked suddenly afraid. "You know Lady Arya's friend?" the queen asked with surprise. Ser Davos nodded in affirmation. King Stannis had the boy brought to Dragonstone for his Red Woman, who wished to burn the boy to perform her magic, he explained. "Gods, what kind of monstrous magic is that? And why exactly this boy?" Daenerys asked in shock. Because I am the bastard son of King Robert Baratheon," the boy spluttered out. From Arya's confused face, Jon could surmise she did not know about this, but there was no mistake. The boy truly showed a great resemblance to the late king. Daenerys herself was silent for a moment, while the boy looked utterly frightened. Then he bowed to the queen. "Fear not, I have no interest in your crown. I only wish to help Arya," he explained in a shaky voice. Daenerys did not comment the boy's words, but turned to Arya, who was now at Gendry's side. "It is true. Without him, I would have never been successful," she defended her friend. Jon wanted to speak out as well, but the queen suddenly started to laugh. She sounded almost amused, as if the boy in front of her made a very funny jape. "This gets better and better," she muttered and turned back to Gendry. "Please rise, boy," she told him, and he reluctantly complied. "Look here, I have both a Stark and a Lannister as my ally. I will certainly not harm people who are helping me. As long as you keep that hammer away from me, I have no reason to harm you." Gendry smiled in relief and gave another bow. "Thank you, your grace," he replied. The queen nodded, and as her gaze wandered over the wide hall, it fixed for the blink of a moment on the ugly chair, who seemed to loom like a dark shadow over all of them. For a moment he thought she might step up the chairs and sit down, but instead she turned back to Arya. "Where is the Mad Queen and her brother?" she asked. Roja smiled knowingly. "The Mad Queen and her maester are both dead. We have their heads for you to see, your grace. The Kingslayer is captured, and you may speak to him once he wakes from his sleep. I send one of the girls to take care of his wounds." Jon himself did not know if he should feel relief yet. However, he felt no pity for the Lannister queen. All the people who died because of her will curse her all through the seven hells. Daenerys gave an accepting nod, while Lord Tyrion looked relieved. Then she smiled again, clapping her hands together. "Well, then let us feast." And so they did. Freshly baked bread and wine was distributed among the small folk, while blazing fires were set up to warm the halls and the city. For the first time in moons, the people of King's Landing knew a measure of peace. Yet winter is here, Jon mused. It will be hard for many of them. Does your brother always look like he is attending a funeral after a victory? Tyrion asked jokingly and snapped Jon out of his whirl of thoughts. Arya giggled while Gendry observed everything with great interest, but in silence. The boy was not one of great words. Jon smiled weakly. I am worried about my home. It is a long time ago I received a letter from Sansa. I hope we will be able to return soon. Tyrion softened at his answer. Don't worry. After the Queen dealt with the situation here, it will only be a matter of time until we turn north. Jon did not doubt the Queen's promise. However, he still needed to talk with her. This means we will all go, right? Air asked, sipping from her ale. With all she meant, the Hound and Gendry, he realized then. Sure, he returned. Sansa will wish to thank the Hound for his service. And Gendry, what will she say about him? Arya asked with a hint of doubt. Jon smiled a little. Sansa is not the same. Sansa, you remember. She calls me brother instead of half-brother these days, he explained. Arya smiled, her wild, curled hair whipping around her radiant face. Yes, much has changed, he thought, as he eyed Gendry. Ruzier told him of the boy who traveled with her in the Riverlands, but this boy was now a full-grown man, and he was surprised how little he liked their closeness. Couldn't you just stay the little wild girl you were, he wanted to ask. Yes, everything changed so fast. Daenerys walked through the darkness, followed by Tyrion, who held a torch up in front of him. Sarah Jaime was in one of the better cells in the Red Keep with proper bedding and candles to provide some light. The Kingslayer truly looked like a Lannister. Tall and broad-shouldered he was, with golden hair and green eyes like emeralds. His sister looked very much like him, Daenerys realized. She saw the head of Cersei Lannister only yesterday when Arya Stark showed it to her. They truly are the two golden twins. When she stepped forward, the face of the Kingslayer was almost unreadable in the sparse candlelight. So, we meet again, brother, he muttered, his green eyes directed at Tyrion. Tyrion's face was full emotions, and he granted his brother a small smile. It is good to see you too, brother. Then his eyes darted to Daenerys. May I introduce the Queen? He stood and eyed her through the bars. His red-rimmed eyes widened slightly, and then he laughed. Good for you that you have your brother's and mother's looks, he said, and settled himself down again. Well, thank you, but this not the reason I came for, she told him. He smiled, showing his perfect white teeth. I see, so will you feed me to your dragons, then? He asked in an almost mocking way. Is that what you want? She asked, returning his mocking question. He laughed again. I don't care what happens to me. Tyrion seemed unhappy with this answer. Stop talking such nonsense, brother. Yes, Cersei is gone, but there are still things to live for. The Kingslayer narrowed his green eyes in anger. Do you think I've forgotten what you did to Father? Tyrion frowned. Jaime, listen to yourself. Father wanted to kill me. You know how he treated me all my life. He, the little lord, ranted, but was cut off by his older Rizer. He still was our father, he yelled back. Tyrion was silent for a moment. Well, brother, for what it is worth, the Queen wants to offer you mercy. She allows you to take the black in exchange for a favor, he told him in a rather defeated tone. He eyed them both in silence. What favor? She leaned closer. I want to know things from someone who was there during the rebellion. Please tell me about my mother. He smiled a little and seemed slightly amused by her question. She looked like you, but more fragile. She was very kind and loved her children above anything. For your father she held no love. She was forced to marry him. He raped and hit her daily. I was there when your mother conceived you. I will always remember her cries. That is one of the reasons why I'm not sorry for the death of your father. He was a monster and deserves to burn in the 7 hells forever. Daenerys felt a lump in her throat. She took a long breath. Ser Barristan told me the same things, so I believe you. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to banish all the hatred she once cultivated for this man. It always pained my brother to be named Kingslayer, Tyrion told her some time ago. She forgave House Stark and Tyrion. So why was it so hard to forgive this man? I want to leave the past behind. I want to start fresh. She opened her eyes again and tried to smile. I hate your father for what he did to my brother's children. He murdered them in their cribs. You were there. Tell me why didn't you at least protect the little children? He looked at her with wide eyes in shock. It seemed he didn't expect this question from her. He looked pained and leaned closer. They were already dead before I could act. I wished I could have done more, but I failed. His words were full of regret and pain. Strangely, I am inclined to believe him. As Lord Tyrion said, I grant you a choice. Take the black or die a painless death of your choosing, she offered. He did not answer for a long moment. She could see the tears shimmering in his eyes. Well, I never thought I would end up in the Watch. Once you know I made fun of Eddard Stark's bastard son for wanting to join, now it seems is him who will laugh. Very well, I will take the black, he replied. Tyrion's face showed relief. Daenerys was also glad she did not have to shed further blood. She wanted to be known as merciful ruler, not someone bathing in the blood of her enemies. I am glad I don't have to order your death. According to King Jon, the White Walkers are coming and the Night's Watch needs every man they can get. We will soon leave for the north with an army. Jaime laughed at her words. Maybe I was wrong in thinking you were sane. You truly believe this nonsense? She frowned. Careful, do not insult me. I gave a promise, and apart from that, I want to see the north. He looked not convinced. I don't care about fairy tales, but tell him I will be prepared. It was dark and dusty, the pale torchlight lightening their path down whirling steps. Daenerys looked at Jon, who had sweat running down his brow despite the snow-covered city outside. He looked like he wished he didn't wear this warm fur cloak of his. Daenerys herself was dressed much lighter, as she preferred in a blue silk dress with small diamonds stitched at the arms and neck. They glittered like little stars in the comforting torchlight. She led him down the bottom of the last steps, where they finally reached their destiny. A large spacey hall spread far and wide with high pillars and might skulls displayed in every free space of the room. Lord Varys showed it to her, a day after they took King's Landing. The skulls of her family's dragons were resting here in all their glory. She turned around looking at Jon, who eyed everything with awe. His dark gray eyes shone like gemstones of purple and violet against the light. It was like the fire brought forward his dragon blood. His expression turned from awe to confusion. Daenerys realized she had been staring a bit too long and felt suddenly embarrassed a little. You are queen, not a little girl anymore. She smiled at him and let the torchlight dance against the wall, showing their shadows in the corner of the hall. They are beautiful, don't you think? She asked, trying to break the tense silence which reigned between them since their last talk at her sickbed. She knew why he kept his distance, and she had to admit she was starting to miss his quiet presence a little. He smiled, lifting his arms. They are impressive, he said calmly, and folded his hands in front of him. But why are you showing me this? There's no special reason, but I thought we could speak here in private, she remarked, waving at the skulls around them. Apart from the dead dragons, of course, she added with a hesitant smile. She herself felt still unsure how she should approach her nephew. For years upon years, she was the only Targaryen left, and now her dead brother had a living son. Not to mention a son who had a better claim to the throne than her, despite him not outwardly desiring it. It truly was a marvel how the gods like to play with mortals. Do I still wish for the crown? Should I still wish for the crown? Did I ever wish for the crown? Or was it all just an illusion I followed out of aimlessness? Those were all thoughts which haunted her those last nights. Even on the day they took the city from the Lannister queen, she did not sit down on the throne. All those years it was her only yearning, and now it felt wrong. Your Grace, his voice snapped her out of her whirl of thoughts, bringing it back to the present. I am sorry for being so forward, but I hoped we might settle our differences, he began, but she cut him off. This is not the reason I called you here. I want you to tell me everything first, and then I will give my thoughts on the matter if it is all right with you. His eyes widened slightly, and there was an unsure look crossing over his face. Yet he also nodded in affirmation of your wishes. What is it you wish to know? Your Grace. She pulled her cloak from her shoulders and put it on the stairs, settling down. She knew it would take some time, and so she urged the king in the north to settle down next to her as if they were little children plotting some prank. Strangely, he did not defy her, and followed her wish. Tell me how this all came to be. How my brother and your mother met. You said you know about it. Jon sighed and brushed his dark hair out of his face. They met at the tourney of Harrenhal. My mother dressed up as a knight to defend the honor of one of my grandfather's bannermen. The man's name was Howland Reed, and out of loyalty and friendship, she defeated those nasty squires of House Frey. Angry with this unknown knight, your father, and my grandfather, King Aerys, called for the knight to be found. Your brother was the man who was sent to find him, but he only found a lady dressed up as a knight. Your brother did not betray the identity of my mother that day, and later crowned her Queen of Love and Beauty to honor her for her bravery. Then a year later she disappeared and was found dying in childbirth while birthing me. He recounted the tale. And how do you know all of this? She asked. He paled a little at this question, but answered nonetheless. The man Howland Reed told me the story. He was there at the tower with Lord Stark to retrieve my mother after the war was lost. For the Targaryens. They found her protected by the King's Guard and defeated them, he explained, and suddenly ruffled his air as if he was a little anxious. Then there's also my little brother Bran. He is a greenseer. He can see things through the weirwood trees. Visions of the past, the future, and the present. It is hard to describe. But he showed me a vision. A vision? She asked, thinking back at her own visions in the House of the Undying many years ago. The Iron Throne covered in snow. It showed your brother, no, my father, and my mother being wed in front of a weirwood tree at the Island of the Faces. Daenerys was silent for a moment, pondering over this. It only confirmed what she thought. So he took her as his second wife, then? She asked more herself than Jon. This means you are the king, she added, and Jon's face paled even more. He looked like someone trembling under a heavy weight. He was flexing his hand fastly now, and she grasped it to stop it. It made her nervous. I never wanted this. All my life I wanted to be the son of Eddard Stark, he muttered angrily, his eyes swimming with emotions. And all my life I wanted more than to be Vizier's servant's sister, she wanted to say, but did not bring it over her lips. Do not wake the dragon, little sister, he would whisper to her as he punched her bloody. Back then she was nothing, but a little child living under her tormentor. It was this humiliating experience which did not cause her to regret his death. He would have never stopped. She thought, no, he was a fool, and with him, I would have never come here. You already told me you do not wish for the crown, but even so alone your existence questions my own claim. Once others find out, it will also question your claim to the north, she explained, laying out the matter for him and herself. He chuckled bitterly. I know that, once the north is safe from the White Walkers, I intend to give my crown to my siblings. Maybe Rickon or Bran, whoever of the two accepts it, he returned, looking directly at her. Daenerys felt a little anger rise inside. Why do you behave so selfless? Your honor makes the guilt only worse. Yet she banished those angry words away. In regards to the Iron Throne, I don't want it. If you wish, I swear to never openly tell anyone about my true birth. As long as you keep your bargain, I am prepared to keep this secret forever. And what will you tell your northern lords then? She inquired. Won't they be displeased if you throw away the crown they entrusted you with? He furrowed his brow. They will think of me as an older brother giving up his crown to the true-born son of Eddard Stark, he explained. But Daenerys could not be satisfied with this. I can't accept that, she returned, a bit louder than intended. Her voice echoed around them, and she saw Jon wanted to retort something, so she raised her hand to silence him, and let her continue the words she was trying to find. You are my brother's true-born son. The Septons might disagree with this, and they might not accept a second marriage, but in the eyes of a Targaryen you are a prince. Also, I am tired of all those lies, and more importantly, I don't wish to be the only Targaryen left, she explained, and stopped for a moment to breathe. She did not like showing weakness or fear for whenever she dared to do so in the past. It only brought her pain and suffering. Quit your pathetic whining, for a dragon shows no weakness, he would tell her again and again. It was now like a well-known rhyme in her head. No, he is dead and gone. If I look back, I am lost. She tried to smile, but failed. The truth is, when I was a little child, all wanted was to go home to the house we lived in with the old knight who used to keep us safe. It had a red door and a lemon tree outside. It was lovely and peaceful there. However, my brother would never give up his dream of going home. He went mad from begging, and despite hating him for what he did to me every day, I believed him. He would be king, and he would marry me like the Targaryens of old. It was a foolish dream, by a madman who my first husband killed for threatening the life of my unborn child. Back then, my goal was clear. I was the only Targaryen left, and now I do know what to do. I do not wish to dishonor my older brother, but I also have to admit to wish for the crown, she explained, as truthfully as she could muster. It felt like a heavy burden was lifted from her shoulder. For the first time, she could speak honest with someone. She looked up, hoping to find understanding in the man next to her. Do you think it is wrong of me to desire the crown still? She asked with a weak smile. He looked at her in silence for a moment. She tried to search his feelings, but failed. Then he broke into a smile. It was like warm sunshine after a long winter's day, and warmed her from the inside up. I don't think it is wrong at all. I was always jealous of my brother Robb for being Lord of Winterfell. I wanted to hate him, but I never could, he explained, and once again Daenerys wished Viserys had been different. What would the world look like now if he only had a little of what people call the Targaryen greatness? She sighed, and Jon was silent again. So what should we do then? He dared to ask. She leaned back against the wall. I can tell you what Lord Tyrion would suggest if he knew, but I don't think you would like the idea very much, she told him, folding her hands in front of her. "What is it?" he asked. She laughed a little at his curious look. "To marry me, of course. Thus your claim would be no problem and I could be queen still." He looked a little embarrassed at her suggestion. "It is really such a terrible prospect for you, King Stark?" she asked teasingly, which gave him an even more flustered look. If the situation wasn't so complicated, she would have continued her teasing for sure, for she enjoyed his flustered look quite a bit. "No, of course not. However, I do not know what my people would think of this. Maybe after the war is done," he suggested carefully. She nodded in agreement. "There is more. It is a delicate matter I do not wish to be known, so I hope you will not use it against me. I would never forgive it if you did so," she continued. "I swear I will never tell a soul," he offered softly in return, raising his hand as if to swear a vow to her. She sighed and prepared herself to lay her weakness bare. "I do not know if I can have an heir. Since my first child was stillborn, I did not conceive again even though I was married and had lovers," she explained. "It would also complicate the matter for you, so a marriage might not be ideal," she added. He ruffled his hair again. "I see," he said, his gaze wandering over the skulls as if they would give him the answer they were seeking. "I don't need an heir," he finally said. "My brothers and my sisters will be my heirs." Daenerys did not know why she felt so relieved at his words, but she brushed it all away, trying to concentrate at the matter at hand. "So what will we do then?" he asked again, breaking the silence. "I am not sure. We should go north first. I want to see those White Walkers you speak of. Once they are dealt with, we can still talk about marriages and crowns. I know it now. I will not be crowned until there is peace. If I am truly to be queen, my reign will begin with peace and not war. Apart from that, what do we know? Winter is here. We might just all die." Jon smiled a little at the mention of his house's words. He bowed his head in acknowledgement. "I agree with you, Your Grace," he said. "However, there is one more thing which might us even help to win this war apart from your dragons." She raised an eyebrow. "What would that be?" He smiled back at her with a knowing smile. "Ser Davos told me there is dragon glass in Dragonstone. As I mentioned, it is one of the few things which can harm the White Walkers." She only nodded in return. Rosier woke suddenly, roused by footsteps on the ground. Sleep was hard for her now that she was residing again in the Red Keep. Her father's memory was haunting her here in every room, and she hoped they would be able to go home soon. She slowly opened her eyes and sat up. There, on the writing table, she found Jane with a lit candle at her side. As the lady equally disliked the Red Keep, Arya offered to share a room with the frightened lady. Although Arya would never admit it openly, she liked having her around. Jane was still dressed in her white nightgown, with her dark hair unbound and falling over her shoulders. Before her was a fresh parchment, and she was scribbling away. Before Arya could say a word, Jane looked up and smiled at Arya. "Oh, did I wake you?" she asked. Arya was a little surprised. The young woman even heard her. She certainly had a good hearing, for Arya always tried to move silent as a shadow. "No, I just couldn't sleep," she replied, crawling out the bed. The stone floor was cold beneath her feet, and Arya immediately grabbed for her cloak to cover herself. Jane gave her an understanding nod as Arya settled down on a wooden chair next to her. "I can understand that. I don't like this place either," she returned quietly as it was still early in the morning. Borosier leaned forward, trying to get a peek at what Jane was scribbling. "Who are you writing to?" she asked, after a moment of silence. Jane brushed her hair out of her face and placed the parchment in front of Arya. "Lord Varys informed me that my younger sister is still alive and now married to a lord in the Westerlands. My father and brother both died in the war, and my mother passed away a year after Robb's death. So I am happy to know that at least one of my family members is still alive." Borosier did not what to say. Through her time on Dragonstone, she became quite fond of the older girl, and she had hoped she might be able to live with them in the north. Surely she wouldn't wish return to the Westerlands after what happened to Robb. "So, what are you writing to your sister?" she asked. "Actually, my younger sister and I never got along well, but she is the only family I have left now. I hope to make peace with her. Besides, I am the oldest, and so our lordship would legally pass to me. I hope now that the war is over, I could make a home there again. Only if the Dragon Queen and Lord Tyrion would agree, of course," she explained. Arya understood her now, but still she didn't like seeing her leave just like that. "So you won't come with us to live in the north?" she asked rather bluntly. Jane grew a bit guarded and unsure, but smiled nonetheless. "Your brother asked me the same thing some time ago, but I don't think the northern lords would wish me to stay in Winterfell. Also, if I inherit my father's lordship, I will have to remarry and have some children. Do not misunderstand me. I loved your brother, but I don't wish to stay a widow forever. I understand, but I think you are wrong. I think Bran, Rickon, and Sansa would love to meet you, she protested. Jane smiled and leaned forward to place a kiss at Ardya's head. I thank you for your kind words. I will think about it. Robb always told me how beautiful Winterfell is, and I really wish to see it at least once, even if I can't stay. That makes me glad, Arya replied, and felt a little flustered by her display of affection. It was almost sisterly. Sansa and her were different, though not always hostile, as some might expect. Sansa could be very nice to Arya if she was in the right mood, then Sansa would brush Arya's hair or even stitch Arya's dresses. Sometimes she would sing and tell her stories when she was ill. I always liked her voice. It made me feel better. Jane then turned her attention back to her work, dipping the feather into the ink. I'm glad too. Now how about hopping back into bed? The Dragon Queen's council will be today, won't it? Arya nodded, crawling back into bed. She followed Jane's advice and slept maybe 2 more hours before getting up to wash herself. Jane helped her dress properly and even braided her hair in a finer style, more appropriate for the coming event. For only a few days after taking King's Landing, the Dragon Queen called for a council to bring back order after the War of the Five Kings and the reign of the Lannister Queen. One of these problems was, of course, the inheritance of the Stormlands. Arya heard Sir Davos discuss it both with her brother and the Queen several times over the last weeks, while they prepared for said council. The boy is the last living Baratheon. Making him the heir might appease the Stormlords to your favor, your grace. Those were the words of the old knight to the Queen. Arya, however, did care little what the knight thought about the matter. What mattered was what Gendry thought, and he seemed utterly frightened by the prospect of being a lord when Ser Davos brought it up. I can't even write and read. How can I be a lord? Gendry protested to the old knight's words. That is what a council is for, my boy. Apart from that, if an old man can learn reading and writing, it won't be a problem for a young man like you, the old knight replied. Roose had hoped with all her heart the Queen would refuse the request. After all, it were the Baratheons who once took the crown from the Targaryens. However, the Queen was practical enough to agree with the old knight. With so much encouragement, Gendry agreed, of course, for he obviously didn't wish to disappoint the old man who saved his life. Arya felt only disappointment about his answer. Years I thought him dead, and now the fool wants to live in the Stormlands far away among those stupid lords who will play with him like a puppet. Today she knew would be the last possibility to convince him otherwise, and so she sought Gendry out, knowing where he would hide. As expected, she found him all dirty and sweaty, working on some sword. Like always with his work, he looked lost in his own world. He looks happy like that. Once he is a lord, this will no longer be proper. When she moved closer, he blinked as if he did not recognize her for a moment. Rosier was not surprised, for Jane had a dress fitted for her. It is what Sansa would call practical and simple, but it was a dress nonetheless. Her mother and Sansa always thought Arya hated dresses in general, but in reality, it was the impracticality which made her dislike dresses. However, this one was pleasant enough to wear. It was gray and not too tightly cut. It fitted well like a second skin and made movement easy. Rosier, he asked, a bit surprised. Rodier rolled her eyes at his reaction. Are you blind now? Of course it is me, she replied. He laughed, ruffling his greasy hair. Yes, all this dirt makes it hard to see, he replied, and continued to laugh. Where did you get this dress from? And more importantly, who turned your bird's nest into this? He mumbled on and pointed at her hair. Rosier felt her anger drain out of her at his laughter. It was hard to be angry with him when he was like that. Jane had it fitted for me, and the hair is also her work, she explained, crossing her arms in front of her. Well, it looks well on you. Better than this. What did this dress they made you wear in the Riverlands look like? He asked. Lordier frowned, remembering the ugly dress Lady Smallwood made her wear. It had acorns on it. That ugly dress had acorns on it, she replied, and Gendry broke out into another bout of laughter. Yes, acorns. However, this fits you well, I guess. The wolf looks nice too, he added, and stepped forward, taking a closer look at the stitching. Rosier gave him a slight slap on the head when he came to close and nearly had his grime drip on the dress. Stupid! You make it all dirty, she scolded him teasingly. He smiled in embarrassment. Well, I still have to get used to all this nobility. She frowned at this. Yet you agreed to the Queen making you a lord, she replied. He gave her a confusing look. I admit I am a bit nervous, but Ser Davos assured me he would aid me with everything, he explained. Arya felt a little anger rise inside her. So you prefer the old knight over me, she wanted to ask, but kept silent. Don't you see they are only using you? It is not really what you want, is it? She asked bluntly. He looked a little hurt by her words, but Arya didn't care in the very moment. She wanted to draw out heat truth. Devos saved my life. I never knew my father or the family I belonged to, and now I have a possibility to make a future. It is true what you say. At first I disliked the idea, but now I have to think back on my friends in Flea Bottom. I realized I could help a lot of people, if I am a lord. Rosiera was struck speechless by his words. It was so unlike him to speak so seriously. For the first time she saw no longer the boy which traveled with her through the Riverlands, but a man who had his own plans for his life. It made her feel slightly guilty. You're not a little child either, she reminded herself. Gendry looked unsure by her silent reaction and stepped back. Are you angry with my decision? He asked. She pulled herself together and tried to smile. Yes, a little. I thought you might come with me to Winterfell. You could have been the smith there. I am sure my brother would have paid you well. Now you will be far away down in the Stormlands. She explained her reasoning, and felt a little stupid as she did so. What did I expect? He refused me once before. Gendry's face lightened up at her words, and it made her cheeks feel all too warm. So you will miss me then? He asked, smiling like a fool. Rosio wished she could slap him to get the smile from his face, but refrained from doing so. Yes, maybe a little, she admitted hesitatingly. Then you won't have to worry, if you think I will let you go alone fighting this war. Your brother is speaking of you, don't know me very well. I surely won't sit here in the south, waiting while you are fighting, he replied with sudden determination. A sudden feeling of happiness filled her. So you will travel north with us? Yes, the queen agreed to it, he replied. Rhea smiled, but tried to tone down her relief. He should not get too full of himself, after all. Well then, Lord Gendry, you should get a bath before the council starts, she remarked in a mocking tone. Of course, Lady Stark, he teased her back. She slapped his arm. Don't call me that, she reminded him, and they both laughed. It was midday when the council began, yet the sky was still dark and the air icy cold. Even Daenerys donned a pelt now and wore warm wool dresses instead of silk. It was now nearly a whole moon since she took King's Landing. The city was back in order, and slowly the lords and ladies from all parts of Westeros came streaming into the city. For only a few days after taking the city, she called for a council to settle the questions of inheritance before she would go north to aid King Jon with his fight against those White Walkers. While she would not be crowned now, she also knew she could not leave things as they were. The Westerlands need to recognize Tyrion as the official lord. The North will be officially granted independence, while the Stormlands will receive a new lord if everything goes as planned. At first she disliked the idea of the bastard boy becoming heir to the Stormlands. But after she saw what loyalty the boy displayed towards the Starks, she knew the old knight spoke true. Better to have an ally like this boy set up in the Stormlands than some stranger. Daenerys felt all their fixed on her as she took her seat at the high table. I had been erected in the middle of the Great Hall, for it was the only place in the Red Keep which allowed to harbor such a great number of people. They also put up warm blazing fires, warming against the cold outside, while on every wall she had the banner of her house prominently displayed. She wanted to let them know who ruled now. At her side, at the high table, her allies were placed. There was Lord Targaryen green and gold, with his lady wife, Princess Arianne, in orange silk. Only a week ago, the princess birthed a healthy child by the name of Gorlan, and now the heir to both Highgarden and Dorne. The boy was, of course, with his wet nurse, and so House Tyrell and House Martell consisted only of these two people. On the other side was of King Jon, with his sister Arya. Even the Stark girl wore a dress today with her hair braided elegantly. Lady Jane's work Daenerys figured, for she knew the lady had a good hand for all kind of things, be it tending to wounds or braiding hair. Maybe I will ask her to braid my hair too, Daenerys mused before turning back to the matter at hand. On the lower tables, the rest of the lords and ladies were placed. Most of them were from the Reach, the Westerlands, the Crownlands, and of course the Stormlands. The North, on the other hand, was represented by King Jon, while the Riverlands were represented by Arya as the emissary of Lord Tully, who wrote he could not simply leave the Riverlands now that he only recently took it back. At last there was of course Lord Royce, who spoke for the Vale and Asha Greyjoy, who for the Iron Island, despite the fact that they were still in the hands of her uncle Euron. Daenerys knew the fierce lady was quite displeased by this, but she assured her she would make her the ruler of the Iron Islands once things were settled in the north. Daenerys took a deep breath before rising from her seat. It was this simple movement which silenced the whispering lords and ladies. My lords and ladies, I am thankful for all of you coming here to finally bring peace to this kingdom fractured by war and disagreements. She began, her voice rising in strength with every word, and echoing through the spacey hall. I know many here still hold a grudge against my late father, King Axlerus, for what he did in his years as king. I hereby acknowledge him for what he was, and apologize profoundly for his crimes against any of you, she added, and paused a little. There was clapping by some and whispering by others. Daenerys sighed, and her gaze darted to Tyrion, who sat next to Varys. Today the small imp was dressed in red silk with the lion all in its golden glory displayed on his doublet. But more importantly, we came here together to plan the future of the realm. First, I wish to speak about the rulership over the Westerlands. She explained, her gaze resting on Tyrion, who stood now on his chair so the other lords and ladies might see him properly. Daenerys could see the displeasure in their faces of the lords of the Westerlands. Many of them did not like the idea of being ruled by an imp, but Daenerys had no intention of coddling them. The realm bled, because of the Lannisters, and they would have to be satisfied with a dwarf. She grinned and raised her hand, pointing at her little hand of the king. As son of Tywin Lannister, I propose Lord Tyrion takes up the lordship of the Westerlands. I know many of you might have hoped for Sir Jaime to take up this position, but he himself agreed to join the Night's Watch in exchange for his life. Also, Lord Tyrion is officially my hand and trusted advisor, which will bring great honor to the Westerlands, and I am more than sure he will rebuild what was destroyed during the war. There was hesitant clapping, but Daenerys knew they would not rebel against her wish. Their army was broken in Highgarden, and now they had little hope to make conditions. Daenerys smiled satisfiedly, and moved on the next matter which concerned the North. Content with the result, she moved on to the next topic. The North. Secondly, I wish to make an important announcement regarding the North for bringing me the allegiance of both the Vale, the Riverlands, in service in my war against the Lannister Queen. I officially grant the North full independence from the realm. Of course we will still be allies, but the northern lords have suffered enough through the southern lords, and thus I grant them freedom, she explained, her voice loud and booming. There was enthusiastic clapping by the few hundred men Jon brought with him when he came to speak with her. Jon granted her a sincere smile and returned, while Ardies was guarded as ever. Then Jon stood and bowed respectfully to her. Thank you, your grace. The North assures you to fight for you again, should there be need of it. I thank you, she replied briefly, before turning back to the assembled lords. Thirdly, there is the matter of the Stormlands. I have been informed there is no lord installed, as the last one was killed in battle in Highgarden. She asked the group of lords sitting at the table on her right side, and saw that Snuyed, with a yellow tunic and small black birds stitched, rose from his seat. He was not old yet, but his face was covered in scars from the pox. His name was Ser Roland Storm, the natural son of the former Lord of Nightsong. Or so Tyrion explained to her in preparation of the council. He also once served Stannis Baratheon, who named him Castellan of Dragonstone. You may speak, my lord, she told him, and the lord gave a thankful nod. What you speak is true, your grace. House Baratheon died with Stannis Baratheon when he perished in the north. During the reign of the Lannister Queen, a fool of a lord ruled installed by the Lannister Queen. Daenerys nodded in understanding. I thank you for your confirmation of the state of affairs. However, Stannis Baratheon was not the last of the Baratheons. For Ser Davos here brought to my attention a boy who shows a remarkable resemblance to the late king. He informed me also about the fact that this boy was brought to Dragonstone and identified as the former king's bastard son by Stannis Baratheon himself. The lord's face widened in surprise, and a lot of whispering could be heard among the other lords sitting behind him. Forgive me, your grace, but I was under the impression that boy died after he was freed by Ser Davos here. Before we can accept any such a lord, we would like to see the young man to gain our own impressions, he replied, and Daenerys nodded in assent, even if she was a little surprised. The lord knew about the boy. She turned to one of her Gureds and urged to bring in Gendry and Ser Davos. All eyes in the room turned to Gendry, who tried to appear as serious and as lordly as he could. The new clothes certainly helped. He was dressed in a fine golden tunic with the stag stitched on his vest and displayed prominently so everyone would see. Of course, he also carried his warhammer. Next to him was the old knight, who had his hand placed on his shoulder as they walked towards the high table. The lord speaking for the Stormlands stepped forward and stood frozen in wonder as he stared at the boy. His eyes seemed slightly watery, and Daenerys wondered what kind of relationship this lord had with the late Baratheons. Gendry looked more than pale, as if he would vomit any moment on the older lord's boots. However, the older lord's serious expression changed into a smile, and he patted the boy's shoulders. "Gods, it is as if Lord Renly came back to us," he muttered, and Gendry tried to smile. "I thank you, my lord," he replied politely, and the old lord smiled, only brighter. Then each of the other lords eyed the boy, some with curiosity and others with distrust. However, it seemed that no one could deny the fact the boy was of king's blood. Finally, when they all had their curiosity satisfied, the old lord turned back to Daenerys, who stood there with an expectant look. "I assume you intend to offer him the rulership in the Stormlands, your grace?" the lord asked with hope in his voice. Daenerys nodded. "Yes, my lord, indeed, but not without conditions." "May we hear them, your grace?" the lord asked, a bit more guarded now. "First, Lord Gendry will need a proper council, which also needs to be approved by the crown. Second, he will give up all claims to the Iron Throne." She named her conditions. "Can you agree to those conditions?" she asked the lord, the men he was speaking for, and the boy. The lords whispered and talked for a long time. She found herself smiling, for she could clearly see from their faces that they would not refuse her. Her conditions were more than reasonable, and if she thought about her brother Viserys, he would have surely not shown such mercy. No, he would have burned them all. Finally, the old lord turned back and bowed his head in acceptance. "We accept your conditions, Grace." Daenerys smiled, satisfied with the answer, and stepped down towards Gendry. "I might not be queen yet, but hereby I name you Lord Gendry Baratheon, Lord of the Stormlands," she announced. The boy's face was all flushed. Now his blue eyes filled with fear. Daenerys smiled and patted him lightly on the shoulder. "Please take your seat at the high table," she told him, and he complied without another word spoken. Bran dreamed again. He always began with the first vision. He was beyond the wall. But instead of snow, everything was full of green and lush forest surrounding a massive weirwood tree. There the man struggled against the children of the forest as they drove a sharp obsidian dagger into his chest. His skin turned pale, and his eyes started to shine like 2 stars of frost. He was the first of the White Walkers. Leaf told him they were once created by the children to defend themselves against the humans who burned down their forests, but Bran never had the possibility to ask why they turned against their creators in the end. "I have to go deeper," Bran reminded himself. He breathed slowly, letting himself drift away. Memories upon memories fluttered in front of him. Trying to find the right one was like trying to find a single coin in a vast ocean. He took a long breath, and then he let the visions play out in front of him like he had done 1,000 times before, and hoped he would find what he was searching for. He saw a group of men staggering through the snow, and all covered in thick cloaks, clinging to their torches, which provided the only source of light in the darkness around them. Then one of the men collapsed while the others watched in silence before leaving him to die. Bran could not say how much time passed, but at last only one man remained. He reached a clearing with hundreds of weirwood trees. There the man collapsed, and Bran could hear his pitiful weeping. Then, as if conjured, the children appeared, all golden-eyed and armed with their obsidian spears. Their eyes glinted brightly in the darkness as they stepped towards the man. In the blink of an eye, the vision changed again. The same man stood now in front of a weirwood tree, holding the hand of one of the children as blood dripped from a wound on his arm. Bran could not make out what they were saying, but he realized it was some sort of agreement. The pact between the children and the first men, like in the stories of old, Bran mused. Then the familiar feeling of sickness overcame him, indicating he dwelt too long in the visions, but this time he was determined to find the truth. "I need to see it all," he told himself, and continued his search, as the shadows danced in front of his eyes. The sky was again pitch black, and there were no stars visible. He saw an army of corpses clashing with half-starved humans. Their swords and torches were the only light in a battlefield of darkness. Bran shivered as the living cried out, and were torn apart by walking corpses and ice spiders alike. Then they arose anew, fighting against their former allies. It was a terrible sight, but Bran tried to calm himself to keep the vision steady. He knew he needed to see this. This is important. Then he saw them. The White Walkers sitting on their dead horses, and their eyes blue as frost. In the midst of them rode their king with a crown of glittering ice. "It is the same man. The first White Walker," Bran murmured to himself as he watched the battle for Dawn play out in front of him. Finally, there was the hero of old with his red blade blazing like 1,000 fires. He drove it deep into the king's heart. Black blood started pouring out of his chest, and with a terrible cry like a very high lute tone, the creature faded away in the fire of the red blade. Then the weights dropped like empty puppets, leaving only silence in their wake. Left of the king was only the obsidian stone in a bottle of black blood. Bern's heart was beating fast, and he felt his strength waning. Yet he knew this was not the end. There was still more to see. He needed to dig deeper. So if the king was killed by the last hero who is the one leading the army of weights, so Bran gathered his remaining strength and let the visions continue. The next place was familiar, but different to its present-day state. Giants carried ice slabs, helping to raise the barrier which stood even now, thousands of years after it was erected, the wall. Among the toiling man clad in black and the giants stood a man with a solemn face and dressed in thick pelt. His gray eyes were dark and pale like those of his Bran's father or his sister Arya. Bran knew then who he was. My namesake, Brandon the Builder. Bran stepped closer, but then the vision disappeared again. Why show me this? What does it mean? He felt his head throbbing painfully, but he tried to compose himself. I can't fail. Banishing away the pain once more, he looked around and found himself in a wasteland of winter. There was a man clad all in black riding through the wilderness, with the old ironwoods as his only companions. The wind whipped harshly, throwing the man's hood away from his face. Bran froze in shock. His face was long and solemn as well. A stark face. Filled with curiosity, Bran followed the man through the storm, until he suddenly halted his horse. An even harsher storm was now whirling around them, making it hard to see farther than a few feet, so Bran could not make out anything in the distance. Then she appeared. She was incredibly beautiful, with skin as white as the moon and her two blue eyes shining like two twin stars in the darkness. Her voice was so soft, Bran could not understand what she sang to the man who stood frozen as if under a spell. The man then kissed the woman, and to Bran's shock, they coupled right there in this storm of ice. They turned and rolled, and Bran stared in horror as she drove a dagger of obsidian right into his heart. Like the first White Walker, his skin turned white and his eyes turned blue as frost. Bran now remembered the stories old Nan told him about the Night's King and his corpse bride. Her skin was said to be as cold as ice, and when he gave her his seed, he gave away his soul as well. He then brought her back to the Nightford, and after their unholy union, he declared himself king and her as his queen, ruling for 13 years in terror until Brandon the Breaker and Jormund defeated him. Bran closed his eyes for a moment to forget his ever-growing pain. The storm was now gone. He stood in the shadow of the wall and an ugly castle in the distance. An army of men stood and watched as the castle burned with black smoke filling the air. Is this the Night Fort? Bran wondered. Bran watched as the castle burned, and only when the flames died down he dared to make his way to the ruin. His heart was now beating fast, like a drum. Dark corridor after corridor followed until he found the great hall, not unlike his home in Winterfell, but burned in the walls all blackened to form the fire. There he found the man from his previous vision. He cradled his corpse wife in his arms. She looked unmoving and dead. Bran crept closer and realized the creature wore a crown of glittering ice, like the first king killed by the hero with his blade of red fire. Yes, it is the same fine crown of glittering ice. So the 13th commander became the second leader of you White Walkers. So it is him, the one who attacked the cave and killed the three-eyed raven. 1,000 of these thoughts flickered through Bran's mind as he observed the creature. Even though Bran was not able to understand what the creature spoke, he still felt the darkness and the anger in his bearing. Finally, the creature rose and deserted the castle, carrying away his corpse. Queen being swallowed up by the winter storm. So he didn't die, Bran realized. And now he is coming to take revenge. This last thought flickered at the edge of his mind as he was thrown out of his vision, finding himself back in the Godswood in Winterfell. He felt Mir's warm hand on his cheek, but he felt too weak to speak as he drifted off into darkness again. When he woke, he felt warm again and was covered under fur with several candles lighting the room. "Gods, Bran!" a fearful voice exclaimed, and a warm hand touched his head. It was his sister Sansa who looked down at him with a smile of relief. "What happened?" he croaked, feeling the weariness in his bones. "You wouldn't wake from your visions. For days you lay unconscious, rambling nonsense," Sansa explained. "I tried to find something," he tried to explain, but he could not find the words for it. He needed to rest first, he realized. "Well, now you need your sleep. Later I will bring you some food." Sansa told him, and Bran had to smile a little as her serious expression reminded him of their mother. And so he slept for half a day before he felt well enough to sip some soup with Sansa's help. Rickon was also there, grouching at her side with Shaggy Dog while Summer rested next to Bran's bed. "Did you have bad dreams again?" Rickon asked with a concerned look in his youthful face. Bran smiled weakly. "No, I saw nothing. It was a nice change," he returned. Sansa ruffled his hair and settled back against the wall. "Mira will be glad to hear it. She hardly slept herself watching over you." Bran felt warm and comforted by the thought of Mira watching over him, but he also felt slightly guilty. "I will never be able to repay her kindness." "Did you get any news from Jon during my sleep?" he asked Sansa. "Yes, it seems he is finally coming home. He also brings the Dragon Queen, Lord Royce, and, you won't believe it, Arya is with him too." Bran felt his heart flutter in happiness. "I was right. I saw a glimpse of her in the Riverlands. This is wonderful and good news for us," he replied. "So, Jon is bringing dragons?" Rickon asked with great interest. "Yes, little brother. From what I saw of her, she has more than one." Bran explained, but from Sansa's face he could read that something was wrong. "There are only 2 of them left now, it seems," Sansa explained, when she saw his confused look. "Also, it seems the Lannister army was defeated at the Battle of Highgarden and Queen Cersei is dead." Bran nodded. "This is good. At least we can now focus on the true threat ahead. If we don't stop the White Walkers, we will all be in danger." Sansa gave him a hug and smiled. "If you worry so much your hair will turn gray," she joked, and Bran gave her a crinkled smile in return. Then a servant girl came bolted into the room. "Lord Stark and Lady Stark, there are visitors for you. They say they know your brother, the king," she explained, and Sansa ordered her to bring the guests after some discussion with Bran. She insisted he should sleep, but Bran felt he slept enough. There were 4 people who entered the room. One was a chubby man in company of a woman and a small child at her hips. Then there was an older man with an unfamiliar face and dark eyes. "Samwell Tarly, isn't it?" Bran asked with a knowing smile. The chubby man laughed. "You are Bran, if I remember correctly. I mean Lord Stark." Bran laughed. "Bran is enough. May I introduce my sister Sansa and my other brother Rickon?" "Tell us who you brought with you." "I brought my wife Gilly and my son, little Sam. This here is," he started the introductions, turning to the tall man. The older man looked tense and uncomfortable. "I am Jeremy Mormont, and I owe my life to the abilities of Sam. I came here to offer my help against the White Walkers. We also brought a Valyrian sword which might help." Bran nodded in understanding and brushed his red hair out of his face. "Be welcome here, Sir Jorah. I know about you and my father's past, but do not fear. I saw how you suffered, and I consider your debt to be paid. However, I would recommend to not seek out your niece, Lady Mormont. She would not be happy to see you. I fear, in general, it would be better to hide your identity here. It might upset some of the other northern lords." Jorah Mormont nodded in acknowledgement. "I will heed your advice." "I hope to find Jon here," Sam asked. Then after the talk with Jorah Mormont was finished, "He is still in the south, but he will come home soon, bringing with him the Dragon Queen," Sansa explained, while Sam looked rather disappointed by her answer. "Of course you are our guests until Jon returns," Bran offered kindly. Sam gave a thankful bow. "I thank you then, Lord Stark. I mean Bran." Jon stared out to the darkness of the sea. Above him were a million stars twinkling like diamonds on an inky sky, while the wind and the whipping waves drove the ship towards home. Nearly 10 moons ago, he left for the south, leaving Sansa in charge of Winterfell. Now he was finally coming home. "You look troubled, brother," Yara remarked, appearing in a warm cloak of fur. She was back dressed in her leather and her hair whipped wildly around her face. Jon smiled wryly. He should be relieved they were finally going home. But he could not rub off this subtle feeling of anxiety. He knew how terrible those creatures dwelling behind the wall were, but none of those soldiers or knights coming with them would be prepared for what he already knew. Not to mention most of them were never experienced cold winter like in the north. Yet, we still have 2 dragons, he tried to comfort himself. He looked up for a moment, finding Dragon flying above them. His dark wings spread wide. Rhaegal was not with his brother, but this was not unusual. He would often fly off to hunt. Jon knew Daenerys hoped he might warm up riding Rhaegal, but the one time he did it nearly made him puke out his meal. "Are you not happy?" "You have your army and the help of the Dragon Queen." Arya continued trying to draw him out of his silence. Jon could not quite place how he felt. Was he relieved? Yes. But happy? He was not sure. To be honest, he felt utterly scared. Not so much about himself, but for his family. How long until those creatures would strike? He brushed those thoughts away and smiled at Arya, who furrowed her brows at his silence. I'm worried it will not be enough. Those southern nights and Duraki are not exactly winterproof, he explained, and Arya nodded in agreement. There is something else, I can see it, she added, pestering him like she often did as a child. She was quite tenacious when it came to such things, so he knew there was little use to hide it. She would not let him off the hook until he spilled the beans. He sighed and brushed through his hair before leaning forward and resting his arms against the wooden railing of the ship. There is something I should have told you a long time ago, he explained. What would you hide from me? She asked, and he could see the displeasure in her face. He laughed a little. I didn't tell Sansa either. Her dark gray eyes were now boring into his, and he knew it was the time to tell the truth. I told you Bran has certain abilities. Well, there is more. He can see the past, the future, and the present. He showed me a vision which changed everything. What is it? Spit it out already, she demanded, a little impatient. He felt like there was a lump in his throat. He swallowed and then spoke. He showed me my mother, he finally said. Tarkia's face lightened up with happiness. He knew it was for his sake. Well, this is wonderful news, isn't it? She asked, obviously a little confused by his lack of happiness. You know my mother, too. You saw her statue in the crypt in Winterfell. It is the only woman next to grandfather and our Uncle Brandon, he mumbled to the darkness, and averted his gaze from his sister. A moment of agonizing silence passed between them, and it took him some strength to look back at his sister. Her idea looked like her mind was working fast, trying to decipher his words. Her brow was furrowed for a moment, and then her gray eyes went wide in surprise. She grasped his shoulder tightly for a moment. Then he knew she got it all figured out from the way her eyes lightened up with shock. Gods. Jon, this means, Father, never, you are not my brother. You are my cousin, she muttered, and there was so much emotion in her voice, it made his heart ache with pain. I'm sorry, he replied helplessly. Arzia's grip was still tight on his shoulder, and another agonizing moment passed. There were 1,000 emotions displayed on her usual guarded face, as she seemed to ponder the meaning of all this. Yet, in the end, she smiled, despite the hurt displayed in her face. Well, it explains why Father never told you who your mother was, doesn't it? She asked with a sad smile. He nodded his head in affirmation. Yes, Eddard Stark made his son to hide my true birth. My father is a stranger, and the blood of the dragon. Yes, my true father is Rhaegar Targaryen. It sounded still strange and foreign to him. Even the Queen seemed to believe him, but sometimes he still wished it was a lie and he could just go back being Eddard Stark's bastard. His younger self would have laughed at him. It doesn't matter, she finally said. I'm sure Father saw you as his son. It doesn't matter who made you, but who raised you, she protested, and Jon smiled at her words. Your words are quite encouraging, he said gratefully, and she leaned on his shoulder. It doesn't matter to me, you will always be my brother, and my father will always be your father too, she insisted. Will you tell the Dragon Queen? Arya asked, then after another moment of silence. I did so already, he returned. Arya gave him a surprised look. When, after the battle in Highgarden, I had not much of a choice, she was a bit angry at first, but now she seems rather accepting, more so than I expected. I think she is quite happy. She is not the last Targaryen anymore, he explained. Arya smiled. Well, I am just happy she did not burn you. Jon nodded. Believe me, I was very afraid she would take it the wrong way. Lordia frowned at this. Still no one can prove who you are. Even if this Prince Rickon married Aunt Lyanna, most Septons would not consider it proper. In their eyes, you are a bastard Deld, and so she doesn't have to be afraid for her claim, right? I made the same argument, but she didn't really see it the same way, he explained. It also seems my mother married the prince under a weirwood tree and became his second wife. She also brought up the possibility of a marriage, he added, feeling suddenly a little flustered by the thought. Most lords would gladly take this chance, but for Jon the Iron Throne meant nothing. It was an ugly chair in the south which caused the death of so many of his family members on both sides. He also understood the Queen better than she might think. She wants to restore what was lost, something Jon wished for the North just as much. Yet, he had to admit he felt now much lighter and comfortable around his aunt after they had their talk in King's Landing. If she isn't playing queen, her company is quite pleasant, he found. And with taking the position as king, he knew he might have to marry someday. At least none of his siblings would be forced into a marriage. Aemsir's face was full of curiosity. And what did you tell her? She asked a little to quiet. I didn't really say anything. She said, we should settle this after the war is done. Well, I agree. But she also wants me to tell Lord Tyrion about my true birth first. Arya smirked. And would that be so bad? The dwarf will probably choke on his wine. Jon ruffled Arya's hair affectionately in return. Well, thank you for your good advice. Arya brushed his hand away and laughed. Well then, be on your way. I will get back to Gendry and Ser Davos. He tries to teach Gendry reading and writing. Gendry has it, and it is quite amusing to see those two bicker. Jon gave a guarded smile at the mention of Gendry. He understood his sister liked this boy by the way she treated him. He also remembered that as a little girl, she always insisted she would rather run away to the wildlings than marry some stupid lordling. Now he wondered if things might change with this boy. Lady Stark would probably throw a fit if she knew her daughter is interested in a bastard boy. The fact that he is a kingly bastard and probably a future lord would not change the stubborn mind of Lady Stark, he knew for sure. Right there, he decided he would not wait any longer. He needed to accept the past, like Lord Howland Reed told him. The Dragon Queen, no Daenerys as she insisted for him to call her some time ago, after their visit to the Dragon Skulls and King's Landing, was in company of Lord Tyrion. There was also Missandei, her lady-in-waiting. Usually she would linger with the unsullied man named Grey Worm, but today she followed the queen around all day. Jon, please sit with us, the dwarf greeted him, and Jon complied. Daenerys smiled, her face a little flushed from the wine. Jon drank some of the wine the little lord offered him, and he listened to some of his amusing stories. A few hours passed by, and the lady-in-waiting finally left. He wanted this conversation to be a secret between those two other people. Jon decided it was now time to address Lord Tyrion. You once asked me about my mother. I think it is time to tell you the truth, my lord. Tyrion smiled and poured himself some more wine, his eyes shining with curiosity. Well, you drink a lot today, Daenerys remarked with a smile dancing on her lips as Jon drowned another goblet. His heart started to pound fast as her gaze lingered a little longer on him. It was more often these days that he felt this way in her presence. Pull yourself together. So, tell me, Jon, what is this great secret Lord Stark has been guarding like a dragon his gold? He asked in good humor. However, he grew more serious the moment he saw Jon did not smile at his jape. Lord Stark had a very good reason hiding the identity of my mother, Lord Tyrion. The reason for this is that Lyanna Stark is my mother, he said, and his gaze fixed at a distant spot far away. Tyrion nearly dropped his goblet while Daenerys gave an amused smile at her hand's reaction. You are joking? The dwarf asked, awestruck by the information. There was a moment of silence before the dwarf suddenly started to laugh. Jon did not laugh, nor did Daenerys, but the dwarf did so for a few minutes before he got a hold of himself. Forgive me, he apologized, but it is so obvious, and no one of us ever questioned the Honorable Eddard Stark bringing home a bastard from the war and raising him amidst the eyes of his lady wife.